Mr. Maxonian.
Yeah, welcome back to a brand new video, and on this video we're going to have a look at Avro Vulcan XM655, which we featured last year, which I went around last year, and Avro Vulcan XM594. Avro Vulcan XM655, which is based at Warwick, and also XM594, which is based at Newark Air Museum.
Go into the alternator to right. 2,000-mile warrant, you can carry 3 of those racks and 1 on support. So the 2 gaps before and after that middle rack is where you can place 2 more racks. Nuclear payload was the Blue Danube, which is what the bomb originally was designed for. The bomb took up nearly the entire length. Yellow Sun was the primarily big large thermonuclear bomb used the second Mark version in the middle position. And later you went to the tactical nuclear bomb, W117B, which is just half the length longer than one of those and a bit thinner. But you would only ever carry 1 nuclear weapon internally because that's what they were authorised to carry. America, China, Russia, they can cram as many nuclear bombs as they want, whether that's safe or not inside a bomber. Britain tended to go on the more caution side.
It's either, today's been either weirdly too bright or too dark. It's been so very, very weird. I've had to have some knowledge. I've had to try and use some skills, and that's always not in me. You like me? Just like Tony, come on, stand here, stand in the middle. Well, I try to do an alright job, but you know.
So this is the bomb bay, where the bombs would have been. These are the bombs that it carried, 1,000 LB bombs, GP bombs, 3 carriers, each holding 7 bombs. This was the Vulcan bomb bay fuel tank. 2 fuel tanks could have carried in the bomb bay at the forward end and 1 at the back at the rear end. Yeah, I've got the pilot here. So how old is what was the craft made?
XM655 was the third last Vulcan to be manufactured. So she was produced in 1964.
Yeah.
She served during the Cold War with the RAF for 20 years. And then she was bought by a guy called Ray Jacobson, who hoped to put her onto the civil display circuit. But he ran out of money. And so the aircraft was taken over by the owners of this airfield here at Wellesbourne, Michael and Rob Littler, and so she's been here for 40 years.
Wow.
And we formed the Maintenance and Preservation Society that looks after her back in '93. Excuse me, led by a guy called Derek Powell. And in '96, David Thomas and I taxied her, fast taxied down a runway. So in 2.5, 3 years, they got her from a very vandalised condition up into a condition where we could safely run her up and down the runway under her own power.
Wow.
She was predominantly a 50 squadron aircraft, and if you take a photo of the fin of the airplane, the crest at the top is the city of Lincoln. Lincolnshire was bomber county, 72 airfields during the Second World War, 69 of which were bomber airfields. 50 Squadron are the dingoes, the dogs of war, and as I say, she was predominantly serving with 50. And then there's a standard military registration and rounding to make up the rest of the memorabilia on her. But because she was one of the last to be manufactured, she's got the big powerful engines.
Yeah.
The one that was displaying up till the end of 2015, 558, got the 200 engines. This one's got the 300 engines, and so significantly 3,500 pounds of thrust more on each engine. Basically, 20,000 pounds of thrust is their output. Internally, they're producing the equivalent of 52,000 horsepower each. Pretty good. So very powerful. Second fastest aircraft in the RAF's inventory to 40,000 feet, only beaten by the English Electric Lightning, which would probably still beat the Typhoon, I would think, although it would be a close run match. Interesting story when the Typhoon came in. They were all gathered together for the first flight of the Typhoon and all commenting on the noise of the engines, and the Rolls-Royce mate said, oh yeah, well nobody told us we had to make them quiet. Yeah. So,
Have you flown any other aircraft or just this one?
I flew Hunters to start with.
Wow.
And then these. And then I went into the training game, teaching people how to fly jets for many, many years. I enjoyed that, and then couldn't get back to the front line because of it. But never mind, I was enjoying myself.
Yeah.
So that was good. Yeah.
Did you ever go up in the air with one of these?
He's gone on.
I flew this one.
Yeah. Oh, you've flown this one.
Yeah,
Huh?
I've flown this
Not
one
had lunch
before. And I served predominantly on 9 Squadron, but we borrowed this one evening. And Nick Dennis, who's also, well, he's not here today, but he's also crewed with me up and down the runway taxiing her. I flew Vulcans for years, not as many as Nick. He's done 5 tours. I only did 1 and a bit.
Yeah.
Because I was so young and she was going out of service. It basically at the time I got my captaincy. So
Yeah. Wow.
yep, there you go. Luck of
Yeah.
the draw.
Says there. Says.
5-seat party jet. Yeah.
Is it quite cramped inside?
It is, yeah. It's
Yeah.
cramped trying to get between the pilot seats when you've got all your kit on.
Yeah.
If the temperature of the ocean's below +10, you've got to wear a cold dry suit.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you've got a life preserver. So yeah, you're pretty bulky before you start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it warm in there today?
Not too bad actually
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
It asked me that if it was mid-June, and crikey, it's
Yeah, I
hot.
bet it was hot in May because I was here back in
Yeah.
May. It was a warm day then.
We've got an air conditioning unit that we can put on anyway.
Oh, have you? Right, okay.
Yeah, but it's never that effective.
No. No.
Yeah. So she worked well today, very well. Even all the powered flying controls came online, which is quite remarkable. Yeah, she's very good.
Yeah.
And
Does it take a lot of maintaining?
she takes a lot of maintaining.
Yeah.
You think you've got a plan engineering wise, but she'll dictate something else to you, i.e. break something, and you've got to sort of
Try
put it
and,
all back together
put it
again
right,
before
yeah.
you get on with the program that you really
Of
wanted
course.
to.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So, but generally, it all works. Everything is serviceable and can be wound up, bar the radar in the front, the mapping radar.
Yeah.
It can start, but it can't move. So
Oh, right.
that's a bit of a limitation. But anyway, you can fry people with those things. So
Yeah.
best to have it silent, I think. Yeah.
How much fuel does it hold?
Right. She's got 14 internal tanks. 4 within the fuselage, right at the front, right behind the pressure bulkhead where the rear crew are.
Yeah.
And they're the biggest tanks. And the rest of the tanks, 5 either side. The tanks, number 2s are the biggest. But in total, she takes 72,000 pounds weight of fuel, which is 9,000 gallons.
Amazing.
That gives her a range of 4,500 nautical miles.
Yeah, wow.
So that can get from here to the centre of the United States quite easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's good.
Does she burn much in like doing these sort of sessions that we're doing today? Like 10 minutes, 20
A
minutes?
couple of £1,000 weight, I would think,
Yeah.
for doing the 2 sessions today. So, and fuel's expensive.
Yeah, it is,
So
yeah.
it's important we get a few people here to pay in their way. Hello, Martin. And
That's it, isn't it?
yeah,
That's it, isn't it?
yeah, it's got to be done.
course
Got to
it
be
is.
fueled. Got to pay for it.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I'll leave you with this fella. Thank
Yeah.
you very much, Mark.
No,
Pollitt.
not
Yeah,
at all.
thank
Lovely
you.
to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
your
you. No
interest
problem. Thank you.
And enthusiasm.
Thank you. No problem.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
to be back.
That's Mike Pollitt.
Well, hello, and welcome aboard my office. This is a Vulcan B2, the third last one to have been made, and that's the picture from the left-hand seat, looking at principally the flight instruments. And as I come down here, you may be able to see the controls for the flying controls. And right at the back, which is behind me and out of sight, there, the 4 start buttons, and behind those 4 red buttons is the mass rapid start button that we use today. On the starboard seat, where the co-pilot or the first officer used to sit, does sit, similar flight instruments, and on the right hand side, all the pressurization for the cockpit, anti-icing for both engine and airframe, and the in-flight refueling switches. In the center, you've got the engine instruments. 1, 2, 3, 4 from the left, jet pipe temperature at the top, RPM gauge below that in percentage terms. So she idles at 24.5 and full power is 100%. And below that, the oil pressure. Bottom left, we've got the hydraulic gauge. The hydraulics open the bomb doors, control the brakes and the nose wheel steering. And obviously the throttle's here, and after that we've got the fuel panel, and in the black box at the back that is the autopilot. So there you've got it, and it's very warm up here. And the view, well, that's a view from a Vulcan bomber. This was the third last one to be manufactured, so she's got the big engines, and as you heard today they all started perfectly. And you can see the air-to-air refueling probe right down there at the front. Sorry, the windscreen wipers obviously wants to get in on the act again. So there you have her.
So I'll let you fire away.
So what we've got here is, this is Vulcan V2, and it arrived, well, it was born in 1963, this one, and retired from the Air Force in 1983, when it flew into here from Waddington, and we still had a little bit of a runway available here, and it was called RAF Winthorpe, and yeah, landed here, pretty much parked here, and hasn't moved since. So what you see is what was flying more or less when it went out of service. So there's a few panels missing, but generally everything is as it was. 5-man crew. You've got 2 navigators and 1 air electronics officer. The navigators are split into the nav radar and the nav plotter. In simple terms, the nav radar was responsible for the targeting, so finding the target and dropping the weapons. Using his radar screen there, radar that's got a 400-mile range, so he would be picking up coastlines and then narrowing down and targeting things eventually. Well, the only time that the Vulcan was used in anger was during the Falklands, so eventually you'd probably see like the runway, and then he could mark that. Yeah, so yeah, and eventually put in the coordinates, and the system will automatically drop the weapons onto the target. So for the Port Stanley thing, it would be 21 1,000-pound bombs. He drops the weapons, or makes all the selections for the weapons to be dropped. The nav plotter, he's all about getting to the target on time. So if, for example, the time on the mission was to drop the weapons at 2:30 in the afternoon, his job is to get you there at 2:30 in the afternoon, not a minute before, not a minute after, but smack on 2:30. So he's monitoring the weather, because from a Falklands point of view, it's a sort of 6.5 to 7 hour transit from Ascension Island to the Falklands. Weather can change considerably from what you think it's going to be, so he's monitoring all that. He's looking at his fuel burn, he's looking at how much fuel he's using, how much fuel he's got left, whether his diversions are still valid, etc, that sort of thing. So he's all about getting there on time, and so he'll be talking to the pilots all the time, speed up a bit, slow down a bit, depending on the weather conditions, etc, so that they can drop the weapons at exactly the right time. Because it's not just about dropping the weapons, it could be ground troops who now need to go in at smack on 14:30 as well, to do it. So. And then you've got the air electronics officer. Now the air electronics officer, I consider in a Vulcan is probably the most important person. A pilot will obviously tell you that they're important, but the air electronics officer on a Vulcan was certainly the eyes and ears of the aeroplane. So his responsibilities were not only distribution of the electrical power for all the systems that he operates, and by that I mean, you know, if sometimes generators drop offline, he can rejig the routing of the electrical power to make sure that his equipment is still, you know, fully powered up. But he's also responsible for the defence of the aircraft. And when I say the defence of the aircraft hasn't got. Can you just give us a couple of minutes, Mike?
Yeah.
The aircraft hasn't got any self-defence suite. You know, so he can't shoot anybody. You know, if somebody's shooting it, you can't shoot back at it. However, what he has got, he's got a jammer, a number of jammers, so he can jam enemy radars. He's got a rearward facing radar, so he can see enemy fighters coming towards the rear of the aircraft. He can listen to the sound that the enemy radars are making and then associate the audio sound that he gets with whether it's a high frequency radio frequency or a low frequency radio frequency, i.e. if it's low frequency, it's likely to be a long range radar. If it's a high frequency, it's likely to be a short range radar. So you react differently if somebody's close to you than if they're further away. So he can jam them, he can put out chaff, or window as it's sometimes called, which are, you know, little slivers of aluminium foil, which interfere with the enemy radar picture. You know, it just confuses the picture. And then he's also able to deploy flares as well. So if it was a heat-seeking missile after you, the flare burns hotter than the engine that the heat-seeking missile is going for, and hopefully the missile is seduced onto the flare rather than onto the engine of the aeroplane. So that's a big part of his job. He's also the communicator. So you can see there he's got a Morse code key. So he's responsible for the long-range communications on the aircraft, reporting back to headquarters whether the mission's been successful or unsuccessful, etc., etc. Deciding whether, you know, some of those messages will need to be coded up so that they can't be intercepted, and then you know, the perceived enemy or the adversary knows what you're doing. So yeah, in my opinion, he is probably the most important part of the crew. You obviously have the two pilots up on the top deck. We'll call that the top deck. They are the pilots. They are the captain on the left, co-pilot on the right. But as a crew of 5, they all work together. And you know, in reality, one is no more important than the other. Both pilots have got ejection seats. The 3 guys down the back do not have the luxury of ejection seats. So if there was ever an abandoned aircraft situation, you would hope that the pilots would keep everything straight and level, tell the rear crew to abandon, and one by one they would lower the door and get out of the aircraft, strapped to their parachutes. Okay. Once the rear crew have gone, then the flight deck can eject and the aircraft crashes into some safe place if they can't make it home. Worst case scenario is something catastrophic happens and the flight deck have to eject, and then there'll be a lot of noise, a lot of adrenaline, and the guys at the back, to be fair, probably haven't got much of a chance. However, you know, they would obviously, their training would kick in, they'd turn their seats round and they would still attempt to get out of the aircraft as best they could. But by this stage the aircraft might be starting to fall out of the sky. So there'll be a lot of G-forces on the guys in the back. Excuse me. I just lean over. The AEO can have a look down the periscope, so he can count out if there's a number of weapons have been released. He can count them out and see whether the weapons have been released. He can count them out as they come out of the bomb bay. It's also a situational awareness tool, in the sense that, you know, the flight deck might turn around in certain circumstances and say, actually, we've only got indications that we've got problems with the undercarriage. Well, he can give them a backup call as to whether he can see the undercarriages are still locked up or whether they are actually down. And so it gives them an indication and helps them. During a mission, the blinds would be down, and this curtain would be down, and you three guys would be in the dark. You'd be in the dark because it's you know, you need to look at the radar screen, and you need to see all those bright ups on the screen. You need to see that little orange screen there with the dots on it as well. Of course, if you've got sunlight coming in, you can't see it. So you would be in a mission bubble. You would be in the dark down the back here. You just have these hanging lights to point to just give you any illumination that you needed.
Well, thank you very much, buddy.
That's okay.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Just one last thing, food-wise, long missions, you're taking sandwiches and cans of Coke and probably thermos flask type of drinks. But these little silver canisters, are food heaters, so you can actually put a tin of soup, compost sausages, whatever, as long as you pierce the tin before you put it in, put the lid on, and you can flick a switch and they'll electrically heated. So there's some warm food for you. And I think that's pretty much it.
Quite tight in the cockpit, isn't it?
Well,
I wouldn't like to try and get through that.
you wouldn't want to be a big fella, would you?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, buddy. Appreciate
That's
that.
all right.
Thank you.
Okay.
So this is the cockpit area.
Cruiser now route to state 15, which is fairly close to the aircraft, route goes in 15 minutes. From there, we have route 05, which will be quickly 11 minutes, and followed by the transport, and then that's the mass rapid. With mass rapid, we're going to get the aircraft ready to go in seconds. There are high pressure air bottles in the aircraft itself, which runs 3,700 psi. Once up to all engines will come up to working power. This will also start all control services, the electronics and the electric. The power controls will come online. You've got to notice that, if you notice at the moment, all the flight controls are all set. Once the engines start, they will all centralise with the power plant controls take over. And you'll be able to see how quickly the aircraft can move forward. It will move forward about 10 feet from engine start moving. Especially compared to the 30 minutes it took before to do the normal engine start. So the difficulty maximum of the aircraft. So we'll go quickly. Let's take a look at the next one. 04, render state 05 is now in 4. I'll say again, render state 05 is now in 4. Put controller out. Attention, this is the bomber controller. The bomb is lower 4, scramble, scramble, scramble. The bomb is lower 4, scramble, scramble, scramble. Bomber controller out.